Good afternoon, Professor. This is week 5, Biology 230, and we're doing the axial and appendicular skeleton, and I'm going to attempt to show you here in this model. I really think that this model is not that great, especially for the inferior part. I'm gonna have to bring him in this way, so let's see, bear with me. Well, the axial skeleton, it consists of the head, the vertebrae, and the rib cage. That's the axial skeleton. We're going to start with the anterior, which is the front of the skull. We have the nasal cavity here. We have the vomer bone. The sphenoid is behind the eyes. It's a bone that looks like a butterfly. That's how I remember it. We have the ethmoid bone, which is this very, very tiny, small bone that's next to also the lacrimal, right there. We got the zygomatic, the maxilla, mandible, and your frontal. That's the anterior. Yes, I got all of them. Now we're going to look at the posterior. And for the posterior, we can still see the mandible. There. We have the occipital bone, parietal, temporal, and that's that for the posterior. Now we're going to do the side, and that is called the lateral side. So for the lateral side, we have more here. Let's see, we can still see, I believe, the nasal cavity. We have the occipital here, parietal bone, temporal. Can still see the maxilla, the zygomatic, of course the mandible. We can see the frontal. It's on the list. It says that we can see the lacrimal. Oh yeah, we can. Bone. We can also see some of the ethmoid bone. And of course, what else? Yep, that's it. Mandible, temporal area here, the parietal. Inside of the eye there, we can see the ethmoid bone. And it's right next to the lacrimal. Okay, this is the hard part, the inferior skull. You would, I couldn't take off the head, but that is looking up. Oh, there goes my papers. We are looking from the bottom up into the skull. That's the inferior. And I can see, let's see. I can also see through the inferior skull, I can see the temporal. I can see my occipital region in the back here. Oh, this is such a hard one to do on this model. Of course, you can still see, you can look up and without all of this stuff, you would be able to see some of the sphenoid bone. That's what I'm trying to say. I was going to say ethmoid, but no, that's inside of the eye. The sphenoid bone, right there. It really looks to me like a butterfly. Of course, you got, your temporal regions. And so the sphenoid, and you can see the temporal region too. There. So the inferior view of the skull on this model is not that great. Now the vertebrae column, one of my favorites, because my husband actually has a fusion from that's the atlas, 1, 2, 3. He has from 3 all the way down to T to a neck fusion, so I'm pretty familiar with these guys here. So we have the axis. I dropped my pen. We have the axis first. I'm sorry, the atlas. The atlas is this funny bone here that carries the head. Then we have the axis. Then we have the cervical vertebrae. And then right here where this big bone stands out, right there, that's where the T, the thoracic vertebrae begin. All the way down to about here, we get the lumbar vertebrae. Then we have the sacrum, followed by the coccyx. Very interesting. I really love this bone. It allows us this movement, the atlas. So that is the posterior of the thoracic cage. I'm sorry, the vertebrae column. Now I'm going to go into the thoracic cage. So we have, of course, the body of the sternum right here. It looks like to some it looks like a sword or a knife. We have the false ribs that connect to the sternum. I'm sorry. Yes. And then we have floating ribs over here. They're not fully part of the cage, as you can see. These are connected by false ribs, and then these down here are floating. They're not connected. Also, what else? The true ribs, of course, would be these big ones here. These are true right here. They're not, yeah, they're not floating. They're there. Now, going on to the appendicular skeleton, which is, of course, a pectoral girdle, and the upper limbs. Right here, these are limbs. So we have the clavicle bone. We have the ulna and the radius. Here is the ulna. I'm sorry, this is the ulna and this is the radius. The radius, I remember it always because of the way, you know, it gives us that movement. And this is the humerus right here. The hand wrists, we have here, and the wrist is pretty much a bunch of little bones called the carpal, and they're very hard to, they're very, very tough to see, but all of these tiny little bones have a name. And we have the sesamoid and the trapezius, or I'm sorry, trapezium. We got the metacarpals. Yeah, the metacarpals are the ones that connect to the tiny little carpal bones. And then past the metacarpals are what they call, the funny name, the phalanges. Now, the pelvic girdle. This region here is the pelvic girdle. I'm trying to get my notes back into place. Oh, it's an interesting, it's something that most older people break, and it's very painful. My mom, I remember broke her. It was not exactly this part here, but it was somewhere down here, I remember, and I can't remember exactly what it was called. But I remember she had, no, it was her hip. Anyways, okay, so we have the, for the pelvic girdle and lower limbs. So I'm going to be discussing this area here along with the legs, which I think are cool too. So first, the pubic bone, which is here. We have the femurs. We have two femurs. We have a tibia and a fibula. We got our patella, which is the kneecap. And the ilium, which is of course these guys right here that look like little, to me they look like Mickey Mouse ears. And I already said the patella. That's it. Yeah. Now you can see the coccyx tail back there. And there's the pubic area. Okay. Moving on to the ankle and the foot. The ankle and the foot, I actually broke my ankle one time, and now that I know a little bit more of where, you know, just the foot bones and all of this here, that's pretty great. I fractured this little area here. Okay, so of course we have our fibula and our tibia and the fibula, and then here you got the talus, this big one here, calcaneus, and the metatarsal, which is what I fractured right there. So these are your metatarsals, and these are also phalanges. This guy's getting a little heavy. Here we go. The cuboid, I believe it's one of these right here. The talus, of course I already mentioned the talus, which is here. The medial cuneiform there. Oh, there, that's much better. Yes, now you can see that that's the talus. Yes. And the calcaneus. The lateral malleolus, which is kind of, it's right under this bone here of the fibula, the way the fibula is over here, there. Yeah, and this is the tibia. And that would be it, I believe. That is the axial skeleton along with the appendicular skeleton. So we added the limbs after I showed you the axial skeleton. This was very informative, and I'm learning a lot. I really enjoy these videos where we do hands-on and experiments, and that's pretty much it, I believe. Thank you so much for your time, Professor, and have a good weekend.